the future Napier Committee. I have apologies from Councillor Wright. Do I have a mover and a seconder for those, please? Councillor Morton and Councillor Tapane. All those in favour, please say aye or raise your hand. Carried. Thank you. Any conflicts of interest? There being none, there's no public forum today, no announcements by myself. Any announcement, any call for minor matters not on the agenda from anyone? Right. There being none, any announcements by management? And I'd just like to advise we have apologies from Richard, who is usually the lead officer, and you'll see Rachel joining us in his place. Kia ora, Rachel. Do you have any announcements?
Kia ora, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. I just thought I'd let you know how customer services are going since the lockdown. They've had Palmerston North, our after-hour service provider, had a pretty quiet night, which was good news. And then this morning and today has been very quiet for customer services. The main sort of inquiries have been things like, is the rubbish dump open, and what facilities are open, and all of that information is available on our website. And there's been a few noise complaints, and that's been about it. So it's been a pretty good start to it.
Well, thank you. Are there any questions on that announcement before we move on? Thank you, Rachel. I'd like to ask for a mover that the minutes from the future Napier meeting on Thursday, the 8th of July, be taken as a true and correct record. I have a mover in Councillor Crystal and seconded by Councillor Price. All those in favour, please say aye. Raise your hand. Carried. Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Councillor Tapane.
Sorry, I had my hand up for minor matters. Manahuri, 26th of August. For minor matters, please.
Thank you, Councillor Tapane. We'll note that. All right, we will move on to our first agenda item, the resource consent activity update. Do we have Luke joining us, Rachel?
Yes, I'm here. Good afternoon, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay, I'll get started. So this report is obviously just the resource consent update that I provide each committee, each future Napier committee. The resource consenting team has seen an increase once again in our numbers for applications submitted to council. Up from 34 in the same time last year to 50 for the last 6-week period. The majority of these have been residential in nature, which shows that clearly there's a lot of good development still happening within the town, within the city, which is great. The balance of those other 10 applications are industrial and commercial in nature. Moving on to the summary table, pardon me, the expansion of the existing car sales operation at 115 Carlisle Street, which is Bayswater car yard. They have recently responded to the further information request, which was issued by council some time ago, and have provided some information around earthworks, traffic impact assessment, landscape and visual assessment, and cultural impact assessments. Some of that information has been questioned, I guess, from our experts, and we are currently working with the applicant to address some additional matters in relation to that. So that assessment is ongoing. The only other the only other update I have for you is with respect to Willowbank, the lifestyle village that is currently under appeal by the applicant. So that's pretty much all I have to report this week. So I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Luke. Councillor Bogue.
Yes, thank you very much, Luke. Just a couple of comments. It's very pleasing to see the Kaingaora social housing development, very comprehensive and substantial in Mariwa, so that's fantastic. I want to ask a question about the expansion of the car sales operation. When we did our stormwater bylaw a couple of years ago, we talked about car sales places having facilities to remove or reduce the amount of car wash water that went through the stormwater system and out into the estuary. Has that been catered for in this application also, Luke, and if so, how?
Through the chair, that would probably be a question I would have to come back to you with an answer on. That would be a trade waste matter that would be dealt with by another team that would have advised the resource consent planners on. So I don't have that information in front of me, but I can come back to you with a response to that if you like.
Thank you.
Thank you, Luke. If I don't have any further questions, I'll ask for a mover for the report that we received the report. Councillor Bogue, seconded Councillor Crown. Do either of you wish to speak? No. Any other questions or comments? No, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye or raise your hand. Carried. Thank you very much, Luke.
Thank you.
We will now move on to our second agenda item, the draft library and civic area plan, and invite Fleur to introduce this paper to us.
Thank you. Can you all hear me all right?
We can.
Wonderful, thank you. Well, kia ora tātou, everybody. This paper is to seek approval for the release of the draft library and civic area plan for community feedback. The draft area plan sets out how the Station Street site, formerly occupied by the Napier Library and Council offices, could be developed over time. The draft area plan discusses what activities could be housed on the site, where on the site buildings could be placed, and the possible timeline for implementing this plan. The presentation given at the previous Future Napier Committee meeting, as well as the Council report, provided information on the proposed stages of the plan and the benefits this approach delivers. The paper also offers information on the next steps and on Council's commitment to working in partnership with mana whenua throughout the delivery of this project. When this last item came to you, it was laid on the table in order to provide additional time for mana whenua to give input on the document, particularly in relation to the design approach for the next stages of the project. Feedback was also sought on the wording used to capture our commitment to partnership for this project. Now, although this has now been drafted with mana whenua indicating comfort with the draft area plan, its reference to the mana ahuriri settlement and in particular the Te Komite o Te Whanga means this wording cannot be endorsed by mana ahuriri until the settlement bill has passed its third reading. And this is scheduled to occur prior to the full council meeting on the 16th of September. And this is when the completed plan will be presented. So officers continue to work on the engagement plan for the project with input from the project advisory group. A summary of consultation proposed is discussed in the council report, and the completed plan will accompany the report on the 16th of September. So I'd be happy to take any questions that you may have in relation to this item.
Thank you, Fleur, and thank you for all of the work and behind the scenes in this 6-week cycle to get us to this point. Again, I will open it up if we have any questions. Councillor Bogue.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Fleur, and thank you, Deputy Mayor Broughton. This is a very comprehensive and excellent report. Thank you. I just wanted to mention the fact that the older generation, our aged citizens, are avid users of the library and, complained very loudly when it was closed. And I was wondering if it would be possible in the consultation round if we could look at the positive ageing strategy, which we adopted last year, in which an implementation plan was expected to be put together with a positive ageing strategy advisory group. Now, that's not my portfolio anymore, but I'm wondering if this group, A, is in place, and B, if they could possibly be a part of the consultation as well, because it seems to me that we had 7, I think, strategy areas, priority areas from the positive ageing strategy, and one of them fits in totally with the library, and that's things to do, having accessible, affordable facilities, etc. So I'm wondering if the committee, the group, could find out if our positive ageing strategy advisory group is in place, and if so, if they could be consulted on this as well.
Thank you, Councillor Bogue. I see Natasha is ready there to respond.
Kia ora, thank you. Through the chair, just to respond to that very good question, Councillor Bogue, an update on the positive ageing strategy advisory group is that we're commencing putting that together at the moment. It may or may not be in place in time for the consultation for this matter. However, we are able to contact some of the key leaders in the community around positive ageing to get their feedback as part of the engagement plan. And absolutely, there's reference to the positive ageing strategy in the report. So we can definitely incorporate that into engagement and consultation.
Follow up, Councillor Bogue.
Just a follow on, thank you very much. That's really reassuring. I just wondered also if I could jump and suggest that that group also, if available, could be considered for consultation with the City Ambassador program, as well, as safety is a major issue for older people. So hopefully once that group gets up and running, those could go on their agenda.
Thank you, Councillor Bogue. We'll take that. Yeah.
And sorry, just as a follow-up note, we did have a group of, I guess, senior citizens who helped us with the formation of the draft in the lead up to this point as well, through a series of wānanga. So they were incredibly helpful in putting forward what their needs were in the creation of this document to start with.
Thank you, Fleur. Councillor Simpson, followed by Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Yes, to date it's an impressive piece of work and it looks very good, although I do continue to question the location of Council's future vehicle fleet. It indicates a 1-minute walk from the Civic precinct. I don't think that's quite correct. And there seems to be a contradiction in where that vehicle fleet will be parked. On the very next page of the draft, it indicates that may well be future housing. So my question to the committee that's behind this work, have they actually done a productivity loss assessment if council staff have to walk a distance to grab vehicles to get about their normal business?
Sure, through you, Madam Chair. No, we have not done a productivity loss assessment. In terms of where the council fleet could be parked close to the site, we do provide some car parking to the rear of that site in what will be, I guess, a laneway in the future, where the fleet car parks already are, and there is a number of council-owned car parks within the very close proximity of that site that we could look to utilise as well. I do note that we have a very large fleet and that there may be some need to have a look at that. It does seem comparatively high to other councils, so there is some work to be done around that as well. And I guess we need to also be mindful of our commitment to reducing carbon emissions and what that might mean in the future, whether that's through more sort of shared use of vehicles or, I guess, a different set up for how we utilise the vehicle fleet in the future.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I think the observations you make are correct, but I think they should not be treated in isolation to this project. I think the reason around productivity, that does become a cost on people that have consents and things. So I think we have to be mindful that any additional distance that staff may have to walk in the future will become a cost on the people that use some of our services that are pay-by-use service. So I'm just mindful of that, and I think it should be not lost in the day where people seem to think that vehicles are going to disappear. The life of this building will exceed the truism around that, I think. So thank you for your answer.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor Chair. No, I was actually just going to follow on from Councillor Bogue's question, because I note in the report that the Civic Advisory Group has attended Wānanga 1, 2 and 3. Seniors have been at Wānanga 2 and 3, and I just wonder whether or not we're actually consulting with the same people more than once. And, when we talk about specific and the creation of under the positive ageing strategy, whether or not the same people are already being spoken to. So that was just the point I was going to speak to.
Yeah, so through you, Madam Chair, the advisory group, it didn't have a representation from our senior citizens. They were the more direct stakeholders in terms of the Ministry of Justice and the Regional Council, and then so they were been through this process with us along the whole journey, I guess. And Wānanga 2 was when we started to form some of these ideas, where we wanted to have some input from a wider set of stakeholders, and so that was when we brought them in. Through that process, we can only invite so many people, and we do want to hear from a lot more than what we had at those workshops. So we'd welcome any opportunity to get the message out and to provide an opportunity for feedback.
Just further to that, Fleur, could you then identify, when you lump a thing like rangatahi and seniors, can you identify the groups that have been consulted with?
Sure, I can do that.
It doesn't need to be now.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have it at my fingertips, but I certainly can provide you with the information about who came along to that session and who was invited.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any further questions? There being none, if I could just propose one small addition to our recommendation, which is a procedural one. So it will be a new C. Everyone will remember we laid this paper on the table last time, so we just need a formal resolution to uplift that paper. So that will read that the draft library and civic area plan report, sorry, I'm reading it last month one. The future Napier Committee resolved to discuss the draft library and civic area plan. It was left to lie on the table the 8th of July 2021. So that would be a new C. If I could ask for, I'm happy to move that actually from the chair. If I could ask for a verbal seconder.
I'm happy to second.
Thank you, Your Worship. So just from me, I think we've, done a significant amount of work in terms of one-on-one with groups to understand their needs and the development of our draft plan that we propose to release at our council meeting, this for further consultation. One of the key points, I suppose, of like councillors and any community listening is that this is the first stage in the development of our library and civic rebuild process in terms of the kinds of activities that we'll be looking for in the space, the staging of those activities in terms of construction, and a general kind of feel for the spacing. We're not designing buildings or designing parking areas or designing entrance experiences, etc. In this stage, and I think my gut feel is that will be the stage that our community really want to get their teeth into, is the detailed design, but that this is an important step for us in deciding how we stage the development on the site, and what activities we want to put in there at a really high level. So thank you to the team for all of the work in the wānanga that we have had so far. It's been a really intensive process, and I look forward to seeing what the community comes back to us with on this. Your Worship, did you wish to speak?
Just to say that I think it's really exciting that we're moving forward into this next phase with regards to our library and civic precinct area, and looking forward to hearing the initial thoughts of our community. And as you say, Deputy Mayor, I think when we get into the more detailed design, that's when we're more likely to get a high level of engagement. But at the same time, we absolutely need to include the community at this stage while we're doing this high level master planning.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor, is your hand raised from previous or from previous? Thank you. Is there any other councillors wish to speak? There being not, I will put the motion, so that's A with our new C, that we're uplifting this for discussion. All those in favour, please say aye or raise your hand. Any opposed? Carried. Thank you, Fleur.
Thank you.
All right, we'll now move on to our item 3, which is our parking technology upgrade pay by plate paper, and invite Rachel to introduce this one.
Thank you. So to assist with any questions that you may have on this paper, I have with me Blair Bickerton from ITS, who's our provider, and Debbie Hill, the team leader of parking. So the purpose of this paper is to seek your approval to adopt a pay-by-plate parking technology for Napier. In 2020, Napier and Hastings Council undertook a procurement process for parking services, and both councils were keen to retain a common service provider to keep a consistent and standardised delivery of parking services across the region, and to allow councils to achieve the value for money that you get through a joint contracting approach. So the tender evaluation team at that time awarded Global Integrated Solutions Limited, or ITS, and Hastings proceeded with their upgrade to pay-by-plate meters last year, and now is our opportunity to upgrade our technology and achieve those benefits. As you know, Napier still currently runs a mixture of Kale pay and display machines, the big blue machines, and our single bay lollipop meters. In terms of implementation of this project, we can expect the upgrade to take approximately 3 to 4 months. And it's anticipated to be fully complete by the end of this financial year, so 30 June 2022. But a start date and even the completion dates of that will need to be agreed and confirmed due to some uncertainty with stock and contract availability, particularly with lockdown now. So in terms of implementation, though, council staff will broadly take an educational approach to advise the public that the parking meters are being upgraded and the time frames for that upgrade. It will be promoting the pay-by-plate. It's a user-friendly way for parking, and we'll be providing support to users to transition from the old meters to the new meters. And in addition to our usual communication channels, we'll have some of these meters available in the public places ahead of the implementation, such as our libraries and our customer services area, and our staff will be trained to teach people on how to use the meters. And as areas go live, we'll have parking officers deployed into those areas to support people as they use the technology for the first time. And one of the ideas that we've had from other councils when they've implemented this is to distribute flyers and attach those flyers as like a little business card, if you like, that people write their registration number on and keep that on them or in their purse so that they have that available when they go to the meter. So regarding funding for this paper, for this initiative, we're asking for your approval to bring forward $515,000 from the 2022-23 LTP financial year to be brought forward this year to fully fund the project. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Rachel. Councillor Tapane.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Chair. Thank you for that. Rachel, you've already answered most of my questions through the education campaign and the efforts that we'll be making from the staff level around training. I remember when this was brought to us in workshop, we specifically asked around engagement with our older, retired, more senior market of our community so that they were aware of our intentions, had an opportunity to be exposed to this product and were involved in that education and training programs. Could you give me an update or us an update on how that's gone, please?
So we haven't started any engagement at this stage, Councillor Tapane. We once we get your approval, then we will commence implementation, which will be working with our public to inform and educate them about this change. And I think when we spoke in workshop too, we had the idea of reaching out to some community agencies such as Grey Power and such like to attend meetings and talk this change through. The important thing to remember is that these meters continue to take coins, and so in terms of if your preference is to just pay by coin and pay for your times in a straightforward way, then of course that can continue to happen.
Follow-on question, if I can, please, you wish, Deputy Mayor. So a couple of things in the paper. So if we're reducing the number of machines that are available within the CBD areas, your report talks about a significant number. That means we'll have less machines to engage with at further distances apart. And so that to me would need to ensure that we provide the necessary components of training to particularly our older members, as when Hastings went through some change, that was the loudest voice of complaints that came through from the Hastings community. They really struggled with the change in that system. So I'm hoping to avoid that demand on our customer service and our team. Could you give us a little bit of confidence around that sort of thinking with regards to people with disabilities? Are they going to be placed close to disability parks, et cetera, et cetera? I know that's in the weeds, but it will impact on the amount of comments that we get from our community.
You know, it's a really good question, thank you. What we do know in terms of placement of the machines is that we're going street by street at this point to identify the best placement, and there are a number of considerations we have to take into account when we think about placement. The payment options include options that, there include additional options plus some of the options we already have, which is using Parkmate, which you don't need to leave your vehicle at all for, and you don't need to go to the meter for. So we would be encouraging groups that or users that do have mobility problems to enable themselves with Parkmate so they don't have to try and access the meter at all.
Fantastic. My last question, if I may, please, through you, Deputy Mayor, that was the I'm going to have to come back to you. It was
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Tapane. We'll move on. Councillor Crown, followed by Councillor Bogue.
Thank you, through the chair. Just a quick question around the disruption to the businesses in the CBD with the rollout, Rachel. So you've mentioned that placement, you're going to go street by street, that, and you also said that about when as areas go live. So how are we planning to minimise that disruption to those businesses?
Yes, so I'll also draw on Blair if he wants to come into this, but I'll start with answering that, and then I'll see if Blair wants to add to that. one of the ways that we can minimise this disruption is the timing of when we do pull out the old machines and reinstate the new machines. So some places we can do after hours and in weekends or quieter periods. We'll be really mindful of, depending on when our implementation goes, we'll be really mindful of December, January, those sorts of times, Art Deco weekend, all of those sorts of calendar events where we get quite busy. So we're really planning all of that out now. There'll be some areas that are more conducive to doing during the week because they're quieter, and others in the weekend. So it's really a case by case and sort of sector by sector that we'll be planning that work. But we do know that our contractors are available to do after hours work if that minimises disruption. The actual work that happens on the pavement, if you like, is reasonably minimal in that these machines are not hooked up to power, they're solar powered. So, we used to be able to have to pull up pathways and things like that to install these sorts of things, but that won't happen with this. Taking these things out will be a lot more simpler, and putting them in will be a lot more simpler than we've had in the past. But I'll just ask if Blair would like to contribute anything to that.
Sure. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Yep. Yes, we can.
Yeah, just to reiterate really what Rachel said, she had it bang on there. We're working with the local contractors, the council, around times and dates that will suit council moving forward on the project. And, we're taking into consideration all the things that need to be done with regards to the install itself. So minimal disruption, as little as possible to local businesses, etc. And again, working through the plans on dates and times to minimise anything around those scenarios. But at the end of the day, it's down to working with Rachel and her team, the local contractors, etc., to make this all happen for you. So we're working on that plan at the moment. There's a lot of paperwork behind the scenes going on, a lot of phone calls, emails, and meetings that we've all teed up over the last few weeks, and we'll continue to do so. So once we get the official go-ahead this year, we'll be able to bring some more to light on what those plans actually will be. But for sure, as little disruption as possible to local business.
Great. Hey, thank you. Thank you both for those responses. Just in relation to that, I just want to make sure that it's worked into the engagement and comms plan that we give those retailers and businesses as much notice as possible. So if that could be noted, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crown. Councillor Bogue.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. I don't know whether I've asked you this before, Rachel, but with this upgrade, does it have ramifications for our employees? Are our parking wardens going to be replaced by machines? Thank you.
It is a good question. Thank you, Councillor Bogue. The short answer is absolutely not. The parking officers have a really core role in managing parking and movements through the city. Their predominant role really is to ensure that the city is moving and functioning well so that everyone can do what they need to do. And so in a way, this will enable them to, there won't be as many stops, obviously, when you have 460 odd metres versus 120 something metres. They can be more efficient in their work, but we can actually use them in a more targeted way around, hotspots around the city areas and times in which there is high congestion, and we can use them and continue to use them as they already do now in that ambassadorial way. So they have a strong and a significant part to play in our city, and that won't change.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bogue. I think Councillor Tapani, are we back with you for your question?
Yes, thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. Sarah, I love the report. It's really encouraging to see the new features and accessibility and services that will be made available to our public. There was one component around a vehicle moving through the city as a concept to check on hotspots, etc., etc. A trial was being run in Hastings with regards to that. Did we get any learnings from that?
I'm not too sure which you're referring to. So there's two things. One is that we already have our parking officers in a car beat, if that's the right word. And what they do is they respond to service requests from the public for issues of parking outside of the foot patrolling work that we do. That's been in place for some time, and that operates really well. Another feature of this pay-by-plate technology is a license plate recognition cameras that can be mounted onto a vehicle and can carry out enforcement through license plate recognition. Hastings and Napier are looking to have a look at it and see the reliability and incompetence of this software in terms of being able to do some of our enforcement areas, and that if that was something that we thought was viable, then we would bring that to council as an addition to this technology upgrade.
Well, thank you very much. And my final follow-on question from that would be, when this was presented to council, I would mention that the airport was also considering a pay-for-use system, changing their one at the Hawke's Bay Airport, Ahuriri Airport, and encourage our staff to touch base. Did we manage to find any alignment with the intentions of the airport?
Yes, I can ask Blair to answer that, but I passed that on to Blair's company, and I'm sure that they'll be following up with the airport for an opportunity to look for their meters to be changed as well. Yep.
Yes, certainly. We haven't had been in touch with them at this point in time, but certainly we'll be looking into that as well as part of the plan going forward. So leave that one with me, and I will certainly be following that up.
Thank you, Blair and Rachel. Councillor Crystal.
Just a couple of questions. So is this CBD only, or is this Taradale as well?
This will be Taradale as well. So wherever we have paid parking currently, this will replace our paid parking meters.
Yeah, okay. And the second one, when I was looking at how it works, if you move and you've still got time on your plate, you can keep that and move to a different place. So then how's that monitored from the parking wardens if you've moved halfway across town?
So the again, it's all based on your number plate. So they have the cameras are activated with a number plate recognition camera. So they can go along and they'll check the number plate with that number plate recognition camera, and it will come up and say that this person has already credit for this particular zone. And so you'll be able to move around the city as long as you stay within the payment zones that you've paid for. You can use that credit in any other place.
Okay. So do they also get an alert then if a number plate has expired to look for that?
It won't alert them to then go and look for that car, no. But if they are on their normal beat and they are checking that vehicle as part of their normal beat, it will come up to say that that time is expired for that vehicle. Yeah. Debbie, feel free to jump in there if I've got that wrong.
The information that the parking wardens get is all part of the pay-by-plate solution. So the current handheld solution that they have, which is part of the ADR ticket for environment, all the information from a license plate number being put into the system, from a payment being made to the time and area of a particular zone is all carried through into the enforcement officers' handheld solution. So they can walk down the street, let's just say down by your council building there, and type in the letters ABC, for instance. As they walk down that particular street, all the license plates in that particular area in real time for you to look at, and it will say ABC paid for parking at 9 o'clock. The expiry time is at 10 o'clock. It's 10:15. Therefore, they can look to enforce that vehicle, given the time of date, etc. And or if there's a grace period, so like sometimes you put in a grace period to say you paid for an hour's parking, but you still got 10 minutes to get back to your car. So someone's not running down the road in the rain or something to say, geez, I've got to get back to my car. I've only got, it's 1 minute to 10, I'm going to get stung. So you can put on these grace periods and things around that as well. So it really helps the enforcement officers to look at that information and make a call and say, yep, we can give that car 10 minutes grace or whatever it might be to suit, and they can either enforce on the spot, or they can populate all that information and come back to the office in the afternoon and sit down, go through it all and make a call from there. So it's all very flexible in the way that you have your time zones and your street by street areas populated and worked on. And again, you know, it's about empowering the officers to say we can make a call here, or we can do it later on, or if they're in the car, for instance, it's a lot safer, of course, in the car. If you're driving past, they can do exactly the same thing from the laptop in the car using the license plate recognition system as well. So yeah, you know, it's all part of the bigger picture for the solution and technology moving forward for the city.
Okay, thank you, Blair. If I don't see any further questions, could I ask for a mover and a seconder for our resolutions A, B and C, that we approve the existing parking meters be upgraded to pay by plate meters, approve the funding for the 2022-23 year be brought forward, and note that the report proposal will be brought to council. So do I have a mover? Councillor Crystal, and a seconder, Councillor Mawson. Councillor Crystal, do you wish to speak?
Just to say, I think it's a great, you know, moving with the times, and I did use this system in Nelson recently, so I do know about it, and the hardest bit is remembering your number plate.
Good, well done. That's excellent. Myself last week. Awesome.
Thank you, Councillor Crystal. Councillor Mawson, do you wish to speak? No. Is there any other speakers? There being none, we'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye and raise your hand. Any opposed? Carried. Thank you, Rachel and Blair.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
All right, Rachel, I think you're presenting to us as well our next paper number 4, the City Ambassador and CCTV Program Proposal.
Yes, thank you. So this paper is to seek committee's approval to adopt the service design for the City Ambassador and CCTV program and to commence implementation of that program. We've recognised that, you know, due to an increase in antisocial behaviour in our commercial centres, it's left some of our community feeling unsafe in these areas. Using an ambassador approach that is operating similar to other cities will be a better way for us to address these issues. A successful ambassador service needs to be supported by an upgraded CCTV network, and the existing CCTV network is run by the Napier Safety Trust, and it's ageing and near end of life. And Council have already resolved to allocate funding for an upgraded network and to bring that network in-house. So with this in mind, Council officers have designed a service to enhance public safety in our commercial centres through a respectful, culturally appropriate, engagement-first approach. And the service has been designed using co-design principles with a wide range of stakeholders and organisations to help us design the service. And that really speaks to the idea that Council doesn't necessarily see and understand the problem and that we need to understand all facets of the problem for us to be able to develop a service design that meets a good resolution. So the resulting service is designed to include a number of components all working together as a package, and that's where the co-design really helped us to understand those components. CCTV is one of those components. And the components are proposed to be implemented and then matured over 3 horizon points, so 6 months after implementation, 2 years and 5 years, and that coincides with the annual and long-term planning timeframes. So prior to commencing the service, staff will undertake an educational approach with the public to ensure that there is real awareness of the service and that they understand the role and scope of ambassadors and CCT services. There are some financial considerations in this paper for the committee to consider. It is recommended that the service commence from 1 July next year, 2022, and the operating shortfall of 515,000 for this year is made up from the parking reserve account, and then funding the ongoing shortfall for the 22-23 year is made up from rates as part of the next annual planning process. I have Caroline and Natasha with me today to answer any further questions too, particularly around the funding with Caroline. So yeah, I'll open it up for questions.
Thank you, Rachel. Councillor Brown.
Just a process question for me. Just wondering when we found out about the operating shortfall and whether that was, I suppose, before the LTP decision or after?
Yeah, through the LTP planning process, we didn't have a full understanding at that point of what components and what the service really needed to look like. We couldn't properly cost it. And so since we've done the service design work and been able to more fully cost it, we're now able to understand what the funding is needed to stand up the service.
Thank you. Your Worship.
Thank you. Through the chair. I note in the paper that the service model being proposed is for the CCTV monitoring service to be done in-house. Was an outsource option considered? I don't recall actually being involved in any discussions around how we landed on that being an in-house service.
Yes, we did consider outsourcing to Hastings District Council, at least for the first couple of years while we got up and running. And there was a few reasons as to why we thought that an in-house service is best. One of those reasons was that there's a real nexus or relationship between the ambassadors, the police and other agencies. And when you outsource that CCTV service, which runs that connection between your ambassadors on the street and the police and what CCTV is seeing, those relationships are then strongly built within Hastings and not within Napier. And what we've seen from the Hastings and Hamilton models is one of the reasons of their great success is that they have a very close relationship with the police to run the services, and that's quite valuable, where the police really trust the CCTV operators to only call them for the things that they need to call them, and the police know that when they do call them, they attend. So that whole community of services that work together, including outreach, including Māori wardens, including all of those things, when you outsource CCTV is sort of lost away from Napier. One of the other reasons that we went away from it is when we costed it out, there was only about $250,000 or $300,000 saving. I shouldn't say only, but there was about a $250,000, $300,000 saving difference between having our own in-house services and outsourcing it. I don't know if Councillor Price would want to add to that.
If he doesn't, I'll carry on with a supplementary question. So the only outsourcing option you considered was Hastings District Council. You didn't look at any of the commercial providers that are available locally?
No, we didn't. And we did only look at Hastings, and I haven't considered commercial providers. I think that the CCTV trust that is running at the moment has had difficulties in getting the level of service that we would want for it to be, for the cameras to be fully monitored and for them to be connected with the ambassadors on the street and to be targeting and setting the ambassadors' patrols and where they're going. I think that connection is really important between those two functions, and we've largely looked at the models that are in councils at the moment that are successful, and even in the Australian and some of the overseas models, these services were in-house.
Okay. I might have some more questions, but I'll let someone else have a go for now.
Thank you, Your Worship. Can I just ask a quick supplementary or follow-up to Her Worship's questions before we move on? Sorry, I note the hands there. Are you suggesting, Rachel, that if we were to adopt the service design that we would be excluding any external providers in terms of the tech side of things from the CCTV program?
No, that's not what I'm saying. So the main tech provider for the CCTV Trust is a local provider, and Hastings also use that local provider, and we would be looking to obviously go through a procurement process, but be looking to use the same local provider potentially to run all of our purchasing, servicing and maintenance for our tech.
But we would be writing off the option of having an external commercial provider monitor that tech.
Yes, that's right. Like I say, we only looked at the option of Hastings providing that service to us because they're already up and running and monitoring. We didn't look at any providers providing the monitoring services from a private providers.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. Councillor Bogue, then Councillor Crown, then Councillor Taylor.
Oh, popular. Thank you. Oh, it's great to see this program being put in place and quite quickly, really, too. I think it will really be good. Just a couple of comments and a bit of a question, I guess. On page 23, under the 4.3 current situation, you've talked about it's been developed co-design principle with various stakeholders. And I just felt missing from there was the Safer Napier Trust, which is all part of our accreditation as a Safer Napier as a city. And I wondered if they had been considered, because they are key stakeholders representing various groups who are concerned about city safety. And the other point I wanted to make is feedback's been also sought from local iwi representatives, great, and the Napier Youth Council. But again, it would be so good if we had that positive ageing advisory group, because safety is another one of our 7 priority areas in our positive ageing strategy. So just a comment, but I wondered if you had considered the Safer Napier Trust as an important stakeholder. Thanks.
Thank you. I can see Natasha would like to answer that one. I'll pass that one over to her.
Kia ora, through the chair. So we did have the chair of the Safer Napier Trust. I think the group you're referring to is the strategic group, Councillor Bogue. So the chair of that group, who actually leads for Napier City Council, was involved in the workshops and has been part of the project as well. And it sounds to me like the positive ageing advisory group are going to be very busy. And so when they are established, obviously a lot of these strategies and projects that are related to people will be of interest to them as well. So yes is the answer to the Safer Napier program being involved.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crown.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. As Councillor Bogue said, it seems to be coming together very quickly, this project, but for a number of people in our community, it's actually been quite a long journey getting to us deciding to put something like this in place. And just for their peace of mind, what sort of risk is there around us not landing on that July 2022 date for the service to begin, and if there is quite a risk, what are those particular risks?
It's a good question, Councillor Crown. The risks will be anything that might, if if you look at the paper in terms of that 4.5 implementation schedule, any of the risks that might sit into there, so there could be delays in recruitment, for example. One of the things would be finding, the right people for the service, particularly the ambassadors. And so there could be matters there. The tech, being able to get the necessary tech and having that available in the country for us to set up will be another potential delay. We do have, though, by bringing the CCTV trust in-house, we will have quite a number of cameras available to us, and that we can look to over time replace and add to, but we could immediately start to utilise the cameras that are already in the network and available to us at the moment. So I think there's contingencies to that being an issue. Outside of those things, I don't see too many other risks that I can foresee with this being done. There is quite a body of work to do to stand these sorts of services up, and you can sort of see that in that plan. But none of them, I don't think, carry very high risk. I'd invite Natasha or anyone else to contribute to that if they wished.
Kia ora, just to add to what Rachel's saying, I think, and this may be what you're alluding to, Councillor Crown, as well, is there is a risk to the community just in terms of their current perceptions of safety growing or decreasing. And so it's certainly something the community have been asking for some time. So I think the risk would be in terms of them not having that increase in perception of safety, and we know that our current provision is not sufficient and is not as effective as this model.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you, Councillor Crown. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. First of all, I'd like to make a comment that having recently seen the significant benefit of CCTV, I think it's a huge, important part of our community safety. I have just one question: is we don't really, as councillors, have an understanding of what CCTV is currently in the community, and so could we be provided? I know you don't want it as a public document, but could you provide us with where we currently have coverage and where you intend to have coverage? And I would particularly look to make sure that we have coverage in that area around the Mariwa shops, because that is obviously a hotspot that we are working on. Is that possible?
Yes, certainly. I mean, I can provide a email to councillors advising where we currently have, where CCTV Trust and Council currently have cameras. In terms of where we would deploy our CCTV resources in terms of this program, we would undertake a service profile, or a demand profile, I should say, which would look to take police data and overlay it with our own complaints data and council priorities, and look to identify the areas in which we would deploy those resources, and that would be for CCTV and for our patrols. And the intention of that is to put some quantitative sort of rationale as to how you deploy these resources. We won't have everything stood up and at the level, say, that a mature service, say in Hastings or Hamilton have. We won't have that sort of level of coverage or patrols to start with, and so we just need to make sure that we've got them at the right place. Like you say, it's about making sure that we're covering off those high risk areas, that we are putting things into high risk, high value areas, and it might be that some of the cameras, if we take over the CCTV Trust, that some of those cameras get redeployed into areas that we now consider to be higher profile or higher priority. But demand profile that we'd work together with the police on would be part of that thinking.
Thank you for that. And my second question is quite different. Is I noted, I think on page 24, that the Ahuriri Māori wardens you put in the report didn't have the capacity or inclination to participate. Is that because they see it as a duplication, or is there some other reason why they weren't inclined to participate in the ambassador program?
Yeah, I'll let Natasha answer that question. Natasha, are you able to respond to that one? No, I don't think she's hearing me. So as I understand, we had
yes, I am. Yes.
Oh, you are. Sorry. Thank you.
Just in response. Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think Natasha may have just dropped off.
That's right. I can try and answer that question. So we had a representative from the Māori Wardens in the co-design, and they advised us through that co-design that it wasn't a duplication for them. Moreover, they saw their role as being different. While supportive of this and would work closely with the ambassadors, they didn't see that this to be their core role, and they also don't feel that they would have the capacity to do that either. A lot of the Māori wardens are volunteers, and when they're available, but they're not a regular service that we could give some assurance to the public that they'll always be where they need to be at the time that they need to be at. So I think, what we're proposing here is quite a professional service that has really quite mandated times in which they will be available patrolling, and the cameras will be monitored, and we will have that connection with police shifts and directly to the frontline police radio for responses.
That's fine. I think perhaps inclination suggested otherwise, but that, thank you for that explanation.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Brown, followed by Councillor Price and Herwish.
Yeah, hi. Thank you for that, Rachel. Just the whole concept of having people monitoring CCTV cameras, sort of firstly for me, it sounds reasonably early 2000s in terms of technology use. So just looking, are we going to bring in the use of any AI to assist those people that are monitoring, assist them in their workflow? And then I suppose my second question, for some people, ideas around CCTV and AI and whatever can trigger some privacy issues. And I just wondered, do we have a plan for how we manage, I suppose, the ethics of this monitoring?
Yeah, they're really good questions. To answer the first one, no, actually, I'll answer the second one first. Sorry. The privacy implications, it is really important that we have assurances to the public in terms of our processes and how we manage that data, if you like, or that imaging. We would be looking to what other councils are doing, and I know, for example, I visited Hastings and they have a very secure area in which their CCTV is located and their monitors are housed, and the people who do the monitoring are there isn't free access to that place. They have quite strict procedures and policies as to when they will release that data, and it usually has to meet, it always has to, I should say, meet the privacy principles. And that includes police and any other law enforcement agencies wanting to use those images as well. So we would build quite a strong system around protecting that information and that data. And could you repeat your first question, sorry?
AI, I think.
Yeah, just the use of technology and AI in supporting them.
Yeah, look, cameras, the technology is not my forte, but what I've been told is that there is an amount of live monitoring that it's still really valuable to have live monitoring of your areas, but you think about where you're going to have live monitoring. So when you've got hotspots or known problem areas at certain times, the live monitoring is really critically important to get that immediate response from services to that area if that's what's required, or at least try and de-escalate the situation through deploying your ambassadors into that area. It also helps with ensuring that we have good safety surrounding people going into that area if there is something happening. And so by having a human person looking at that data and feeding that through to either police or our ambassadors it is still the first and very valuable component. But that being said, there is motion triggers on a lot of cameras. So Hastings have over 250 cameras. A lot of them are just motion triggered, and they will flash up on the screen in front of the operator when their motion is detected, particularly late at night and early hours of the morning and things like that. I understand that some councils haven't yet gone to licence plate recognition cameras. There is some maybe technology issues with that, and so that's still not, I don't think, at the place that they feel that they want to adopt that. But we would definitely, working with a tech provider, a local tech provider, we're looking to see what the best technology we can get for the money that we have.
Thank you, Rachel. And Steph, did I say that you had something to add to that?
Thank you. Through the chair, just in addition to Rachel's answers to that question, just reminding everybody that we did recently update the CCTV policy, and that included who has access to CCTV, so that answers the privacy question as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Steph. A good reminder. Councillor Price.
Just a question, Rachel. Can you comment on the fact that if it's in-house, the use of ambassadors being used as CCTV monitors and vice versa, please? And I have a second one after that.
Thank you. Yes, that reminds me. So there would be some, I think, cross-training and utilisation of staff for both functions. So as we're growing it, not all people will be suited to both functions, but there will be those people that can be deployed in both, and certainly it acts as backup for each other. So ambassadors can also do monitoring duties and vice versa, and we can cross-train in that way. It's a better offering in terms of recruitment, but it is also enables us to start smaller and grow our functions and cover sickness and leave and things like that with these two teams working together.
Thank you. And my second question is, we dealt with Hamilton and Hastings, and would it be fair to say both of them liked the in-house system?
Yeah, a lot of the service design that we have proposed here is based on the learnings of Hamilton, Hastings and Rotorua and a couple of overseas. We've been mostly in conversations with Hamilton, and Hastings had quite a lot to do with them. And I think, I think Hastings is about 6 years mature and Hamilton's maybe about 8 years mature, and they've learned along the way, and we've had the benefit of their missteps, if you like, and we're trying to avoid that with taking the time to co-design the service in the way that we have and utilise their knowledge. That's not to say that we won't need to tweak it and grow as we go, because Napier is its own unique environment, and we need to be responsive to what Napier needs. But I think that we've been able to sort of take a lot of their lessons learned and built it into the service design from the start.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Wise.
So actually following on from Councillor Price's question, have those other councils actually utilised the services of a commercial provider?
Not to my knowledge, no.
So they don't actually have a comparison to an in-house provider to say that one is better than the other?
No, we haven't. So they don't use private commercial providers, and we haven't asked that of them. They've started from the start with their own in-house services, but I would say that one of the recurring themes and advice that they gave to us was the very close relationship with the police for this to work, and any of the other agencies, but predominantly the police, that once you grow that trusted relationship between your CCTV operators and the police, the service performs well in that. Like I say, the ambassadors can deal and de-escalate with what they can deal with, but when they need police to attend, the CCTV operators they get to a point of ability and instinct in which they know when to call the police and when they don't, and the police know that when they do call, they trust that it's an important matter and they attend. So relationships are really important to this service being successful, and that's why we started with the co-design right from the start, to build those relationships.
So just supplementary question / statement, I guess. When we consider the labour environment that we're currently in and the difficulties and challenges that we're having actually trying to recruit, or businesses, councils, institutions across the whole country trying to recruit to any positions, my concern is if we lock ourselves into an in-house model and we can't actually recruit to those roles, then I would like to know that we've got the flexibility to actually opt to go with a commercial provider so that we can ensure that we can provide a service. So that what we're adopting today will lock us firmly into an in-house model.
That is the proposal, is that we have CCTV in-house run by our own employed staff. However, a technical person will be able to answer this better, but these are just feeds that are can be distributed anywhere. So if there came a point where you wanted to outsource that monitoring from a technology point of view, it is easy to just redistribute the feed to another server.
Okay, so we'd have the ability to utilise an external provider if we needed to, because we couldn't recruit to the positions.
I believe so. I'm pretty sure that, and if I had Duncan on here, he'd be able to help me out with the technology of it, but I'm pretty sure that rerouting feeds and giving people access to the feeds is not a hard thing to do. Having the cameras in place and the way that they operate, it's pretty simple.
Thank you. And lastly, are we proposing that we will be completing a full review of the service after 12 months in light of the fact that it is a new service that we're providing?
What we were proposing is to report back on sort of the maturity, if you like, and how we're tracking. We have in the paper 4.4 some performance indicators, so we would look to take some benchmarks of these where we can of these performance indicators, and then at those milestones, that 6 month, 2 year and 5 year marks, that we would look to report back. But if that would be preferred yearly, we can actually do that too.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Just checking with Councillor Taylor if your hand was up from previous. Lovely. Rachel, I was hearing just through the discussion there that there was a little bit of concern or unease that we haven't maybe explored what some of those commercial monitoring options might look like or given that much consideration. I'm just wondering if it's something that we might be able to have some conversations in between now and council adoption, and perhaps you could talk to us at council stage around what you've found. I know that councillors have had a little bit of involvement with some pretty impressive local companies who are doing this kind of work, so it would be good to at least have a conversation with them and see if some of those benefits that you're seeing come through from the in-house models across the country couldn't be replicated in a private capacity, and at least then we could probably further discuss that at the council table level. And maybe Kirsten, I'll take your guidance on whether this is something you'd be happy to do and whether we should lay this on the table or would be happy to take that just as an action point before council.
I would prefer if we lay it on the table so that we can fully investigate that outsourcing option and then come back and debate it at full council once we've got that information.
Cool. Would you foresee that we could leave that on the agenda for the Māori committee in the ensuing part of the cycle?
Yes, I think that's entirely appropriate, and we can still share with them that we are actually just also investigating the option of outsourcing and keep them informed and as how that's progressing as well.
Okay, thank you. So with that in mind, I'd like to move that we lay this paper on the table and request staff present or gather further information and present to us options on the private supply of the monitoring component of this contract prior to the council meeting, and just noting for the minutes that we intend to stay on the Māori committee agenda as it is now with a similar note. If there's a seconder for that.
I'm happy to second.
Councillor Wise. I'll just check in with governance, give us a second team to make sure that that wording, which was not very eloquently put at the time, but has made its way into the agenda.
Yeah, I've got it, Annette. I'll just type it up if you want. I just haven't got it typed up yet.
I'll just look for a level of comfort from councillors with the general gist of what we're asking there.
Okay.
Everyone's looking okay. So if we're comfortable that we will lay this on the table with some further communication back to us on the private supply of that monitoring component. All those in favour, or sorry, I'll ask if anyone would like to speak to it first. There being none, I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye and raise your hand. Any opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, Rachel, for all your work on this. I think there's just a little bit of concern there around closing off a door that we haven't necessarily had a good talk about yet. So let's do that ahead of council meeting and we will get there with this one. Thank you. All right. I would like to invite Fleur, who is going to present to us the Napier War Memorial Centre policy.
Kia ora. Thank you very much. Okay, so I'll just give a brief summary that I've prepared for this. So this paper seeks the adoption of the Napier War Memorial Centre policy. This is an internal policy and has been developed in partnership with the War Memorial Reference Group. The policy provides direction in a way that enables the maximum use of the centre by the community for functions and events, while protecting its heritage and memorial values for the present and future generations. So you should have a copy of that policy with you, and I'm happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Fleur. I think this is a paper just preceding the conversation team that there'll be a number of questions on, and I've prepped governance that we may need to play around with the wording on the attached policy as well. So I think how we'll run this is we'll go with questions first. I'm happy if there's any sort of foreshadowing of any key issues as part of those questions, and then maybe we'll do a little bit of wordsmithing together on the policy thereafter. And of course, we do have the backup of laying it on the table if we don't quite get there. I will start with Councillor Crystal.
Thank you. Through the chair, obviously something that's quite close to my heart, this. And I am just looking at point 6, which is about the forecourt movements, which has been quite popular within the community. A lot of talk about this, and it's a little bit ambiguous as to what and what isn't allowed. Obviously, being able to pack in and out of events and things is important, but as to what can be parked there is sort of up to the discretion of the manager. But then when you look at point 9, it says to be, cognizant of the memorial purposes of the facility and ensure that activities undertaken with both the Napier War Memorial Centre and its grounds are appropriate and not to cause offence when considering the purpose. And none of us want to see huge gangs of motorcycles like previously has happened. And, personally, I wouldn't like to see 20-tonne trucks parked on there. So how are we going to manage this?
So, Crystal, if I could take that possibly, Fleur, I think you've touched on one of probably the key discussion points of the policy, which is the wording around the forecourt use. And so if we could just park that for part of the discussion on wordsmithing, and we'll carry on with questions to staff, because I think we do need to have a discussion amongst elected members around what is appropriate vehicle use on the forecourt. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Actually, I was going to try and sort of clear this before we start, because the paper says that the policy was developed in collaboration with members of the War Memorial Restoration Group. However, we've all received emails indicating that they're not comfortable. So my question is, why have we come to this impasse when the policy was actually developed in collaboration with them?
I think that might be a question that Her Worship might be able to answer.
So yes, there was involvement with some members of the restoration group. It wasn't part of the actual formal working group in terms of when we met, and also some of the more recent correspondence we've received from people querying the policy. They weren't on the reference group anyway, so it's not just come from members of the reference group. It is a wider group of community members who are part of what they call themselves the restoration or recovery group themselves as a community group.
Councillor McGrath.
Yes, I had concerns with point 6 as well, and I'm not quite sure why we were even isolating out one part of the memorial. The ballroom to me is as important as the forecourt, yet we haven't written out a list of do's and don'ts for that room specifically. So I'm not sure why we are doing it for the forecourt. For me, really, it comes to whoever's running the facility to run it in an appropriately and respectful manner, with the fact that it's a war memorial first and foremost. I just don't think we need to write in the policy all the different little aspects that could or couldn't go wrong.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath. If I could just reiterate to everyone, if we could do questions first, we'll then move into discussion and statements of position, etc. Is that
the way you see it?
That's you, Councillor McGrath. And you, Councillor Crystal. And we will move on to Councillor Bogue, if you have any questions.
It would have been me also on that. But there is another issue that I wanted to raise, or a question. I wondered if, and I know we're doing lots of work with mana whenua, and it's common practice now for us to consult them. But we do, especially after we did our Treaty of Waitangi workshop this week, I think it would be really good to have mana whenua input into the wordsmith, the wording of this. Perhaps it's already happened, but we do know that Māori served side by side with non-Māori, and they were not treated well when they returned from war. So I just felt it would be appropriate for the list of and groups that were being engaged in this, and perhaps looking at the wording of it even, would be our Māori committee, mana whenua, kai whenua, or whoever, if that's acceptable to the committee.
Thank you, Councillor Bogue. And yes, the intention is fully that this go through our Māori committee before it comes back to council, and there may be an opportunity for further discussion in there as well. If I could just ask Fleur a couple of questions that I have, and as other members have stated, we have received a bit of community correspondence over this. The first question for me, and I note Steph is on screen as well, which may be appropriate for her to answer, but we've had a number of concerns around the health and safety in the forecourt, the vehicle movement around the pedestrian access and fire escapes, etc. Could you provide us some certainty that there is that this policy takes the appropriate health and safety considerations into account in those spaces?
Sure. So the point 6, which is around the use of the forecourt, was really the purpose of that was to indicate that there would need to be an association with the use of that building or that facility, the likes of packing in and packing out, as well as associated use through temporarily parked vehicles and the like. And so, that's something that happens now and is managed well. And I guess the health and safety elements of that are managed by the managers of that facility. I think, so I have in point 10, I have to meet the health and safety obligations by the centre's operators at all times. And I wonder whether that's something that, a statement that kind of covers it off well, or whether we need to expand on that any further in relation to the use of that forecourt.
Okay, thank you, Fleur. And just a second question from me was, which was something new that I had heard in a piece of community correspondence, an allegation there was some sort of an agreement or contract allowing vehicle parking to use the forecourt in perpetuity. Are you aware of anything like that?
No, I'm not aware of anything like that. I wonder whether Antoinette or Steve would be on this call and might be able to comment.
Kia ora, councillors. Through the chair, unfortunately Steve isn't on the call, but I am, and I'm not aware of any contract allowing vehicles or restricting any vehicle movements in perpetuity. This is the first I've heard of any such thing.
Thank you. All right, do we have any further questions of staff on the policy team? Doesn't appear to be, so we'll move into that discussion, and I'll pass back to Councillor Crystal, who started us off with the movements on the forecourt. And if I could just, I suppose, pose the question, Councillor Crystal, which you could discuss, which is what is appropriate vehicle use of the forecourt?
Well, to me, obviously, the pack and pack out thing is something that's necessary. I don't think staff car parking on the forecourt is appropriate. And respectful funerals, hearses, weddings, that's, but if you were coming to the War Memorial to view the plaques and if you then turned up to see, 50 motorbikes parked on the hour, I don't think that would be very respectful. So, I think it's just that it says it's left down to the management, but what guidelines do they have as to what's respectful and what's not?
Thank you, Councillor Crystal. And I suppose if we could just on page 3 all have a look at that vehicle parking and movements on the forecourt section, which currently says vehicle parking and movements on the forecourt need to be restricted and controlled to ensure public safety and minimise damage to the building and its curtilage. No vehicle is to be parked upon the forecourt other than loading and unloading purposes or as associated with a booking at the War Memorial Centre. That wording, or as associated with a booking at the War Memorial Centre, was my wording, and the intention around including that associated with a booking wording was to exclude what Councillor Crystal, you've pretty much said, so exclude the parking, the turning bay use, the casual pickups and drop-offs, etc. But we did want to allow space for it to be used for the loading, unloading, booked as part of an event, for display of stalls or funeral processionals, etc. And so I think possibly, and I'm looking for a steer from other councillors, whether it's that or as associated with a booking at the War Memorial Centre wording that's just not quite capturing what we're intending. I have lost everyone overall, so if you would like to speak, actually, Mayor Wise, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I was intending to speak sort of more to it in general, as opposed to suggesting some words at this time. So if you were wanting to try and pull some words together, although I guess what I want to say may feed into how we tease out what that looks like. So I guess just wanting to reiterate that obviously, first and foremost, the purpose of this policy is to protect the War Memorial site, the building elements and the surrounding curtilage in perpetuity. And we're all in agreement with that objective. And the concerns have been raised by a number of people, and I know there's councillors who feel the same way, about the access to the War Memorial forecourt itself and what is the appropriate use of that. So I've been reflecting on this for quite some time, as I've been involved for a number of months in drafting up the policy. And I don't think anyone would disagree that the forecourt area should not be used for just general parking. It should not be used for passenger drop-offs, and it should not be used as a turnaround bay. So, perhaps we need to be a little bit more specific in that regard in terms of the words that we use within the policy. And I can also advise that we're actually right now in the process of having signage done to go at the two driveway entrances that actually say restricted parking, and set that clear message. So we also have to acknowledge that at the moment, due to the constraints in the lower service bay area, the forecourt is required for packing and unpacking of events. That's just the reality. And although I would like to think that one day we might have the funds available to rectify that, unfortunately, with all of our other pressures, that's just not feasible at this point in time. So I think that brings us to what I have seen to be the primary concern of community members that I've been speaking with, and that is around the use of forecourts for events and functions. And so I've been thinking about this for a while, that this is something I'm passionate about, protecting our war memorial. But I have actually reached the conclusion that the forecourt is just as much a community space as the War Memorial Centre itself, as said by Councillor McGrath earlier. And as such, I believe it should be available for community use, provided that all health and safety requirements are being met. So the War Memorial Centre itself is used for all manner of events, community meetings, charity events, weddings, funerals, as well as conferences, etc. So again, how is providing space on the forecourt for any of these types of events any different to providing space within the centre itself, provided it's done in a respectful way? And I have gone out and tested this with some people and returned servicemen in particular who hadn't approached me, but just other returned servicemen who I have had dealings with in the past to test my thinking with them. And one in particular, Peter Grant, was quite happy for me to share his thoughts on the topic. And he essentially said that he has no issue at all with the forecourt being used for events. As you say, the consecrated ground is exactly the same ground as that on which the War Memorial Building and Element stands themselves. I have no issue with tents being erected on the forecourt or other items that are being used for an event delivery. He went on to say, I am absolutely certain that our fallen would want to have people enjoying life and all aspects of that life in their presence. They went to war and made their sacrifice so that we could live the life they have given us. They would want people to be respectful, to enjoy their freedom, and to understand the cost of their being able to enjoy their freedom. And they would not want the War Memorial to be a tomb. And so, that has, for me, and I've had similar comments from other returned servicemen, I think it just highlights for me that forecourt area is just as important in terms of the community being able to use it as the rest of the site and the centre itself. So I think we really need to come up with some wording that reflects what is absolutely not authorised, and then just provide some contexts of how the forecourt can be used for events in a respectful way that it would be in line with the way the whole site's used.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well said. Let's carry on with discussion and we can come back to the wording at the end. Councillor Bogue.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Wise. That was great, and it does reflect how I feel as well. But I did want to hope that the possibility of continued drop-off and pick-up of people, particularly elderly people or disabled people who cannot walk from a car park or a bus stop into that centre, to enable them to access, and I've done it many times myself. I've picked up and dropped off elderly or disabled people. But where else can they go? How else can they get there, basically, if they're not dropped at the door? I don't park there or anything, but that has to be made available, I think, to really allow the full use of this community for all, including the disabled. So whatever wording we come up with, I do hope that it still includes passenger drop-off and pick-up for that purpose. Thank you.
Councillor Mawson.
Yeah, just along the same sort of lines as what Councillor Bogue mentioned. Certainly if it were to be the wording were to say that there's to be no drop-off, that we reassess the car parking situation along Marine Parade to have accessibility car parks reviewed. That's just my point.
Thank you, Councillor Mawson. Is that something that a member of staff has at hand? Do we have accessible parking or disabled parking spots close by to the entrance to the War Memorial Centre? Fleur or Antoinette?
There are 2 disabled parks just to the port side of the War Memorial Centre.
Thank you, Councillor Tupney.
Also, Madam Chair, on that, outside of those just 2 disabled parks on the centre side of the road, port side of the building, there's also no pedestrian crossings. And we've had a number of comments come from our community of the difficulty trying to cross that particular artery. So I'm just reinforcing some of the points that Councillor Bogue made. One is accessibility from one side of the street to the other as well. So the ability to drop off those with disabilities or impairments is a significant factor.
Thank you, Councillor Tupney. Councillor McGrath.
Yeah, just following on from the discussion regarding disability, it goes further than that too, because if we're running a school ball and kids are arriving in fancy cars and they're in fancy dresses and what have you, and the weather's against them, wouldn't it be nice to be able to get, a little bit closer, have a nice little drop-off area so they can head on in? And also one of the last groups that caught my attention who were actually parking on the forecourt were 2 Crown limos for a couple of hours, and no one was really keen to go and tell them to move. And they both dropped ministers off here for an event there. So you can't have one without the other, really.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath. Mayor Wise.
Can I suggest that a car pulling up directly in front of the War Memorial, where there is a significant area of space, 2 driveways and a space in the middle, would be adequate as a drop-off zone? You're sitting there simply for 30 seconds while someone disembarks from the car, without there being any requirement for the car to actually go onto the forecourt itself. And in terms of our Crown vehicles, they can drop off said minister at roadside and then go and find a park on the street somewhere.
Thank you, Your Worship. And possibly just to further on from the ball conversation or something like that, where you're being dropped off in a processional fashion, there would be nothing. I would suggest in our wording that would allow them to pre-arrange that, possibly with the staff, a turning circle or a processional arrival on the forecourt, and have the appropriate health and safety and things all lined up as part of their event. That I'm sure would be an appropriate use in if it was part of the booking. Councillor Simpson.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. I think the issue is not so much the access and the ability for people to move across the courtyard, subject to weather or disability. At the moment, there is nothing that restricts the duration of parking on that site. And maybe what we need to do within the terms of conditions or policy is set a maximum parking time if that vehicle or apparatus is not directly related to an exhibition that is occurring in the hall, and that may actually alleviate much of the debate. In other words, simply put a minimum parking period, 30 minutes or whatever it is, that would help people in times of unloading or loading, but it would also and make it very clear that it's not an all-day car park. And at the moment, at times, it appears that it is an all-day parking.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. I think what we want to get to is people not using it for parking at all, possibly. And just to put on everyone's radar as well, of course, that with the detailed design of the reinstatement of our memorial elements, the placement of the flagstone in the forecourt is part of that detailed design, and that will in itself come with some hard engineering that we will see in that detailed design that should essentially restrict access, as you're suggesting, Councillor Simpson, at inappropriate times. Your Worship.
Sorry, I just hadn't lowered my hand from last time.
No problem. All right, so I suppose I'd look to everyone for some guidance. Would we be comfortable to reword our section around the parking on the forecourt to state the type of activities we think is inappropriate, in replacement of that as associated with a booking reference? Or our alternative is to leave it on the table, do some further wordsmithing and bring it back to full council. Looking for people's views. Your Worship.
I'm happy to lay it on the table as opposed to us sitting here and wordsmithing by committee. And we could perhaps, obviously, get a few of us that are particularly passionate about this, and having heard the views today, draft something up in preparation for the council meeting.
Thank you. Looks like that has good support. Could we, just to give some guidance to that group who's going to get together and do that, just cover off that, I think, that key issue around whether or not we are comfortable with the sentiment the Mayor suggested around that the forecourt be used as part of community events, i.e. you would have stalls, displays, etc. on the forecourt, because that has been an area of disagreement in the community as well. Thoughts on that? Councillor Tapani. And then Councillor Crystal.
Thank you through you, Madam Chair. So the only point I'd like to make in connection to the activities on the front of the forecourt is the complexity that we have a conference and community facility running from our memorial, and often the ability to you're normally drawing in people from outside of a geographical area into a conference, and so there is. My experience has been there has always been a presence outside of the building which either notifies the people that the conference is there or highlights certain aspects of it, promotes it to other members of the public, etc., etc. And that's a fairly common practice around other conferences that I've attended. It's not always necessarily contained to inside the building. And so for me, I'd like to see the development of that policy that enables our staff to work in that space, but I would hate to see us lose the ability to utilise that whole space, because that will impact on, I think, some of the tenders and opportunities that our conference facility might be able to entertain if we restrict in those spaces. Those are the only concerns I have around that. I think there are solutions if we work through them, but that's my position on the matter. I'd like to see some clarity in that space, which would enable conference users to be able to promote and use the centre in its entirety, and they can do so respectfully in conversation with our staff.
Kia ora, thank you, Councillor Tapani. Councillor Crystal.
I think the key thing what Councillor Tapani said was respectful, but I agree with them it being used, if we end up having our Anzac Day service there, for example, we would like to see, obviously, people come and assemble, and there will be things that may go on display, or even our earthquake remembrance and things like that. So there is a place for things. It's just as how respectful it is the key.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Crystal. Any further words? All right, I'd like to move that we lay this paper on the table and delegate to the Mayor to collect a small group of councillors to work on the wording of this and bring back to the council meeting. Your Worship, are you happy to second? Thank you. You wish to speak to that?
No, that's fine.
Thank you. Is there any further comment? Or Councillor Bogue?
Sorry. No, just hope that we do include some meaningful input from the Māori committee as well, so that they feel that sense of ownership with this policy too. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Bogue. All right, all those in favour of laying this one on the table, please raise your hand. Any opposed? Carried. Thank you very much. We will move on to item 6, the local alcohol policy review, and invite Luke Johnson to join us. Hi, Luke.
Good afternoon again. So just for the purpose of this report is to provide an update to Council on the Hastings District and Napier City Council's joint local alcohol policy, and to gain a resolution on when a formal review of the policy may commence. Just by way of background, the local alcohol policy, just before we start, I do have Darren Moore with us today, who is our liquor licensing inspector. He's here in support of me presenting this paper. So by way of background, the local alcohol policy has been in place for almost 2 years now. Both councils have resolved that a review be considered in 3 years after the policy becomes operative, with a full review required within 6 years of the enforcement date, which was August 2019. Under the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act, Section 97, the territorial authority that has a LAP must review it using the special consultation procedure no later than 6 years after it has come into force. and in order to provide a recommendation on whether a review can be carried out in 3 or 6 years, a number of matters have been considered which have been included within my report, and these include research and data required under Section 78 of the Act, legal advice obtained by Hastings District Council, other council LAP reviews to ascertain the likelihood of appeals, stakeholder research group opinions, and also risk versus benefits, which I've tabled within this report. The research from Hastings District Council and Napier City Council show that currently minimal change in alcohol-related harm statistics have been noticed within the local area. More time has been identified as being necessary to gather the data and examine evidence in support of the LAP. The legal opinion, which I've included within my report, supports the review being undertaken within 6 years. And the stakeholders, which have included the health board, police and alcohol licensing inspectors, all agree that there are good policy provisions within the LAP and that the LAP should be maintained and agree on a 6-year review. Pardon me. The current LAP is fit for purpose, and when compared to other territorial authorities, has some strong provisions to minimise harm within the Napier City Council area. So that's ultimately the purpose of this report. My recommendation is for you to note the contents of this report and also to approve a review of the LAP within 6 years or sooner, as required under Section 97 of the Act. I'm now happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Luke. And I understand Hastings have already considered their part of the...
Yes, they have, and they resolved to support the 6-year review, which was on the 13th of July this year.
Thank you, Luke. Councillor Bogue.
Yes, thank you, Luke. Just a question. How long did it take to get the current LAP in place from go to woe?
I wasn't here for that process, but I will ask Darren Ward to answer that if he could.
Thank you.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
It was approximately 4.5 years from the time it was first proposed to when we were able to implement it in November 2019.
Just another question, if I may, please, Madam Chair. Is it true, I mean, the problem that we've all had across the country is the fact that the liquor industry and the supermarket duopoly have been able to put a lot of money into appealing any potential LAPs that would further reduce their opportunity to preserve and sell alcohol. Have you heard that there is legislation pending with this current government to remove their right of appeal? Because I think I've heard it somewhere. Darren.
Yeah, through the chair, I'll get Darren to answer that if he could, please.
Sorry, that just cut out halfway through. Could you repeat your question, please?
Oh, sorry. I have heard that there is legislation possibly pending with this government to reduce the right of the ability of the industry to appeal against local councils' local alcohol policies. Have you heard that?
Through you, Madam Chair, perhaps I could answer this one. We really don't know. We haven't heard that, but we can't really try and forecast what the government might be doing. Once legislation is in place, then we can act upon that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have any further questions? If there is none, I'll ask for a mover of the officer's recommendation. Councillor Taylor, and seconded Councillor Bogue. Councillor Taylor, do you wish to speak?
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor. I think we've just got to realise what the purpose of this report is, and it's not to get into the intricacies of whether any policy changes are needed or should take place, because we don't want to preempt that. This is we should read the report and we should adopt the policy that the policy is reviewed in 6 years, and how that review takes place and what changes or potential changes could occur in there, that's for the review to put for us in the future. So on the basis that that's what we are here to do today, I'm happy to move that.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Good context. Councillor Bogue or any other councillors?
Just to say that I agree with this proposal. It took us nearly 5 years to get the last LAP, the first LAP in place. And I think if we just wait, obviously, there may be opportunities to change that when it comes up. But in the meantime, I think we should sit with what we've got. We fought long and hard for it. It was diluted all the time and with threats of appeals by the liquor and supermarket industries. So let's hold on to what we've got and hope we have an opportunity within this time frame in the proposal to have another look at it.
Thank you, Councillor Bogue. I haven't seen any other hands go up. So if all those in favour, please say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, Luke and Darren.
Thank you.
All right, our final agenda item, I'd like to invite Stephanie Kennard to come and talk to us around item 7, the exemption to trading in public places bylaw. Kia ora, Steph.
Kia ora. Always happy to be lucky last. So I've just cover off a brief overview. This paper presented us to request a continuation of the current exemption we have to the trading in public places bylaw, which currently expires the 31st of October of this year. It relates to events that sell food and beverage within the CBD boundary or Gloucester Street in Taradale. It is limited to 4 parties. These 4 parties are the Art Deco Trust, Napier City Business, Taradale Marketing Association, and lastly ourselves, Napier City Council. This is the 3rd such request. We have previously had a 1-year exemption followed by a 3-year exemption, and this request is for a 5-year, which would expire the 31st of October of 2026. Events that this exemption have previously covered are the likes of the Art Deco Festival, Friday Night Fiestas in Clive Square, Nuit Blanc, which you might know as White Night instead. On top of this, aside from the exemption, each party is still required to formally request their event through our transportation lead at Napier City Council, as well as adhere to any health and safety standards that we require of them, and also traffic management where required as well. So yes, that's the request in a nutshell.
Thank you, Steve. Councillor Bogue. Oh, that may be a hangover. So I see Councillor McGrath.
Afternoon, Steph. How are you?
Good. Very well, thank you.
That's the way. Hey, just a quick question. Sorry, through the chair. Has there been any issues in the last 3-5 years with what you guys have been doing?
Through your chair, absolutely not that we are aware of. We do have regular updates from each of those outside of Napier City Council, of course, with Napier City Business and the Art Deco Trust being the 2 main providers of events. With big events like the Art Deco Festival, for example, there is quite an extensive debrief session that covers everything off afterwards, and anything that comes out of it is dealt with that as well. So, yeah, I am quite comfortable that this has been going well in the past, and a continuation will be fine for a further 5 years.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath. If there's no further questions, I'll ask for a mover and seconder. I see a mover in Councillor Tapani and a seconder, Councillor Crystal. Councillor Tapani.
Thank you. Through your worship. Through you, sorry, Madam Chair. This is fantastic. It's a natural progression from 1 year to 3 year to 5 years to enable those regular city events to add vibrancy and connectivity within our communities. And so this makes absolute practical sense for these particular aspects. And so I welcome this paper and I support this paper. I have one question for Steph, and that is around we have also an existing relationship with the Sunday market, and when there are significant events on, they are asked to move to an alternate location, which I understand is Anderson Park. So is there a portion of our team's planning to make sure that any shifting of existing services is done without any interruption, or those are considered?
Through you, Chair, yes. I believe all of that's handled in a separate team with the Parks and Reserves, because I also believe that the Saturday market in Clive Square has to shift for the Art Deco festival as well. So that's all well handled on the occasions that they do need to move. I hope that's answered the question.
Thank you very much, Steph. It has. Looking for a seconder.
Thank you, Councillor Tapani. I think we hit Councillor Crystal there to second.
Yeah, just concur with Councillor Tapani in saying enabling our vibrancy is a really important part of keeping our city going, and you know, people are always looking for things to do, so the more we can do, the better.
Thank you, Councillor Crystal. If there's no other speakers, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye or raise your hand. Any opposed? Carried. Thank you, Stephanie. Okay. All right, I'll now like to close the future. Oh, my apologies. We did have a minor matter from Councillor Tapani. Councillor Tapani.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just by way of reminder to both our council and our community, Mana Ahuriri is approaching the third reading of their settlement with the Crown at the end of this month on the 26th. And so on behalf of our team, we wish them the absolute best for that day. And by extension, we look forward to opportunities of collaboration around some of the changes that settlement might represent. And just to check whether or not the Mayor wanted to add anything in regards to how we may or may not be participating in support of Mana Ahuriri on the day.
Kia ora, thank you, Councillor Tapani. We will definitely be supporting Mana Ahuriri on the day, and I sincerely hope that there's no delay to this, considering we are now faced with being in COVID level 4, which of course may, if it extends, impact on the ability for them to travel to Wellington for the reading. So I hope that doesn't happen. Should it proceed, we will be sending a contingent to Wakarangapu and some governance representation to go down and support Mana Ahuriri on the day.
Thank you, Councillor Wise. We'll now close the Future Napier meeting, and we'll take a, if councillors could just hang around for a minute after we finish live streaming. I think Steph may want to have a quick chat to us, otherwise we'll have a 10-minute break.